Well, for the last couple of classes, we have been bathing in the light of the psychic being, because Sri Aurobindo here takes us, into one of the most intimate and beautiful description of the psychic being and what happens, or what are the different various experiences when we approach the chambers of the soul. And what's wonderful is he has given us such variety of experiences. Each one could have any one of them or many of them. So he has left a kind of a wide choice of experience for all of us. So when we have that kind of a touch with the inner being, we could perhaps recollect some lines from this Canto 4 and then kind of have a reference saying, yes, that's what I remember in Sri Aurobindo. So it's a very intimate description of the psychic experience. And as we went through most of these lines of this Canto 4, I told you many a time that there's hardly any other writing in his entire works where we get a better description of the psychic being in one place. So we have done a few lines on page 48 of my edition. I don't know what your pages are, but you would recollect that we have gone till the line, a grace and beauty of spiritual light, the murmuring tongue of a celestial fire. I'll take up from the previous line, and in golden privacies of immortal fire, these are native to a larger self that lives within us by ourselves unseen. Only sometimes a holier influence comes, a tide of mightier surgings bears our lives, and a diviner presence moves the soul. It's a bit tragic, and yet it's a reality in our lives that lives within us by ourselves unseen. That, of course, you know now, is the inner self, the psychic being. It is constantly guiding us, living within us, but perhaps that's the only thing that we don't see. And only sometimes a holier influence comes. I think I told you last time about what the mother had told me, how the psychic being sometimes tells us, "Here am I, Vala Jasvi." But we have no time to hear this voice or attend to what this voice is telling us. A grace and beauty of spiritual light. You see, I would like you to note the word sometimes, something, sometimes. You see, it shows us how rarely we hear these voices. So earthly coverings, of course, What are these earthly coverings through which this presence sometimes something breaks? Well, you could say basically these earthly coverings are our senses, but then deeper down, what really covers our being is the ego or the desires. So we are kind of wrapped in these desires and this ego and these senses. So the psychic being has hardly any chance to break through. And then later on he will describe how shy it is. The soul doesn't, is a very shy creature. It doesn't impose. So it takes chances as if, whenever there's something possible, it goes through, breaks through. And then what do we get? A grace and beauty of spiritual light, the murmuring tongue of a celestial fire. You see the word murmuring tongue is the voice of the psychic being. It's a murmur, it's not a big voice, it's not a big order or a command. It's soft and shy. And I recollected a sentence from Wordsworth's poem, The Education of Nature. The line goes like this: "And beauty born of murmuring sound shall pass into her." You see, these poets use this word murmuring sound or this murmuring tongue to denote this kind of a very soft inner voice. Then we say, ourselves and a high stranger whom we feel, it is and acts unseen, as if it were not. You see the same word? That lives within us by ourselves unseen. And the same thing here. It is and acts unseen. The psychic being is so shy, it is unseen, it acts so soft and as if it were not there. It follows the line of sempiternal birth, yet seems to perish with its mortal frame. You see, it is the beauty of this divine element. It doesn't impose. One side, it is this psychic being which goes from birth to birth, sempiternal birth. The evolution is infinite. And each time it seems to perish. You see, please note this word, seems to, it doesn't perish obviously. It seems to perish with its mortal frame. Whenever the body dies, we say the person is dead. But what is dead? It is not the soul or the psychic being. That goes on from sempiternal birth to birth. Assured of the apocalypse to be, it reckons not the moments and the hours. Great, patient, calm, it sees the centuries pass, awaiting the slow miracle of our change in the sure, deliberate process of world force and the long march of all-revealing time. This is the contradiction in our life, that we have this immortal psychic being which seems to perish with the mortal frame when the body is gone. But what is this and who is this? It is this inner being, the soul, assured of the apocalypse to be. Apocalypse, you see the word A capital. It is that supreme revelation. It is that supreme revelation of the divine. So this psychic being knows that one day there will be this revelation. The supreme descent will be there. So assured of that, it reckons not the moments and the hours. It doesn't bother about this life, next life. It knows whatever is happening, the sempiternal birth will end one day in the supreme descent. So assured of it, then it is great, patient, calm. It sees the centuries pass. It is not in a hurry. You see the beauty of the psychic being is unperturbed. It's what's happening in the outer world. because it knows I will realize the divine one day. And this question of I will realize is not just the question, is not just to say that what we normally say the psychic realization. You see, there are two things here. One is our own psychic realization. That means we go beyond the ego, beyond the vital, beyond the senses, and then we say, I have realized the psychic. But what exactly do we understand by realizing the psychic? Because that's very interesting to understand there. Psychic realization is not that something is something strange or outside. It's always there. But the turning point is, I think I was telling you last time about Swami Vivekananda's writings. And most of this Indian spirituality, realization is actually recognition. Or realize is a broader word, but if you want to see very closely, you suddenly recognize, yes, I am that. You recognize your truth, I can say that. You recognize your true being. Because up until then, I have been thinking that my being is my external body, my name, my fame, my ego and all that. But the day I say no, my real being is the soul. So that shift in the consciousness is called the realization. But that is only, it could be momentary, but if it is there constantly, you say, yes, I am in my consciousness, in my psychic being. It's been quite many years back now, I think, let's say even 15 to 18 years, if I'm not too wrong. Once I was visiting, I was talking to Amal Kiran, and I put a question to him bluntly. I said, have you realized your psychic being? Imagine Amal Kiran and me asking the stupid question. But then he did not say yes or no. He said, I've contacted it, but I'm not in it constantly. Amal Kiran, you know the history, all is Savitri, thanks to Amal Kiran. But he says, I'm in contact with it, but I'm not in it. So there is a difference. You see, one can momentarily contact and say, yes, that's my true being. But these little contacts, or this short and brief contacts, when they become long in period, then you are established. And then when they become longer, then Sri Aurobindo would say, there's a psychic governance. You see, there are phases in the psychic being. It's not that once you have touched the psychic being, you are illumined. There are points of illumination, which when repeated, they become a continuous line. And after the continued line, there's a governance by the psychic of your being. That is what you call psychicization. But here, what I wanted to tell you is, this assured of the apocalypse to be, it reckons not the moment's great patient, it sees the centuries pass, awaiting the slow miracle of our change in the sure deliberate process of world force and the long march of all-revealing time. You see, when we say there is an end to the psychic realization, you see, one is the individual connecting the psychic, as I was just explaining to you, psychicization. But then there is the other is the psychic itself is growing in its experience. It grows birth after birth, and then it comes to a point when it realizes its own Jivatman. You see, that's the point I am trying to tell you. When through the process of evolution it realizes its parent, which is called the Jivatman, then that is the highest point, that is the ultimate realization, where and when the psychic being can choose not to return. So that is the ultimate point of this apocalypse that I am trying to explain. That is the apocalypse. Otherwise, for me and you, little contact is my realization. But for the psychic's own growth, it has to go back to its parent body. It's called the Jivatma. And in Indian philosophy and in the Vedas, they have been called by different names. These souls which have realized the psychic being and the Jivatman, they are under different names. But what I want to refer to is, there is one such soul that was brought down by Sri Ramakrishna, and that soul is Swami Vivekananda. So Swami Vivekananda is not an evolutionary soul like you and me, or yours and mine. This Sri Ramakrishna, in his meditation and in his trance, goes into this world of these souls which are there, not static, which are helping from there, but they don't come back to take a physical birth. But Sri Ramakrishna, he went and saw a psychic being in the form of a radiant child. And then he tells the child, come with me to earth. We have work to do. And that is the birth of Swami Vivekananda. So when he comes down in his own Bengali family, and he was called Narendra, as he was called in Bengal, Noren, a young man of 1920, as all of you know, I don't have to repeat the story. But what's interesting is, he was an atheist, Swami Vivekananda, but he was a great, brave mind and a tremendously powerful vital being and a powerful physical. But being an atheist, then he suddenly gets this idea, is there really God? You see, Sri Aurobindo also explains, to be atheist is not to be against Godhead. They are perhaps closer to God, because by denying God, they think of God more than you and me. That's a beautiful part. If you want to be a complete atheist, it's better. Because then they say, no, this is not God's creation, this is not God's creation. All the time they are saying, neti, neti. But all the time there's a Godhead in his mind. So that is how Swamiji says, is there God? Have you seen God? He asks many people. And when Sri Ramakrishna says, I've seen God as concretely as I see you, then that was the turning point. That is the first person who said, yes, I've seen God as concretely as I'm seeing you. And that gave him the clue. And so it happened to Sri Aurobindo. He was an agnostic. He also says, somebody said, is there God? He says, yes, I heard people say that there is God. But these are truthful, honest people. If I say there is God, do I know about it? More reading Savitri, reading Life Divine, reading the letters, and reading Upanishads and the Gita, I said there is God. But these people said, somebody told me that there is God, but I don't know. But then in 1905, in the month of August, he writes a beautiful letter to his wife, and Sri Aurobindo says, if there is God, I must see Him face to face. And in the Indian scripture they say there is God. So the scriptures have said, yes, there is, but if there is, I must see Him face to face. Otherwise, even Dusmar, even the mother, she did not believe in all these things. She says, if there is somebody, the power, I must see face to face. So this is the jigasha, what we call the quest. Not mentally accept, emotionally accept. That's why, in Indian philosophy we have always these words, Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasa. You hear, yes, we have all heard there is God. Fine, very good. Scriptures have told us, Bible and Quran and Gita, and everybody has told us, quote unquote, that Shravana is listening, hearing. But then we say Manana. You practice it. Not only practice it, you think it over. Like Swamiji said, like Sri Aurobindo said, hey, is there really God? So many scriptures have told us. Shall I take it blindly? What if Christ has told me? What if Gita tells me? Fine. I know they're not telling a lie. But is it the truth of my life? Can I say God exists? Somebody asked the mother, Mother, are you God? Very direct question. And mother said, this is a question that should be asked to every human being. And the answer would be, colon. He said, yes, I am God potentially. But the thing is, you must realize. So the whole question comes, I think once in a class also, somebody asked the mother saying that, Mother, if all this is Brahman, all this is the divine, then why all these problems? Mother said, you are telling that. But when you realize that all this is Brahman, the same question will not be there. You see, we only talk, we only quote. But then all the spiritual masters, they said, Manana, give it a thought, thinking, analyze, even reject, deny it. But then that is when the mind itself comes into play. But then, even before we become a doubting Thomas, she says, Nididhyasana. Just practice it daily. So in India, our spirituality always means Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. It's a daily you must practice what you are mentally convinced. You see, the word is Manana. Mana is the mind. So there is a mental conviction, yes, this is true. And I will practice it. Mentally, I know, yes. But can I practice and realize that? And until I realize that, well, it becomes only a quotation for me. Sri Aurobindo, that's why we said, Sri Aurobindo says, Gita says, Bhagavad Upanishad says. We don't say, I say. Well, sometimes they say, I say, because somebody asked Swami Vivekananda, in some context I don't remember exactly, they say, but the Upanishads have not said it. Then Swamiji says, but I am saying that. And somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, in the early 20s or 30s, maybe it was A.B. Purani, he said, you are talking about the freedom of the country, but who can guarantee? So this is, I can guarantee. So these eyes are those universal consciousness, the realized consciousness. It's not the ego saying, hey, I am so and so. So when Swami Vivekananda say, what if the Upanishads have not said? I say. And who is that I? In fact, Sri Aurobindo himself comments on that this is not the I, the ego of Vivekananda. It is the realized consciousness. So they get the confidence. So it's not the ego saying that. In fact, who is that I? Once Swamiji says that the ocean on which Christ and Krishna are waves, the ocean on which Christ and Krishna are only waves, I am a wave of that ocean. So you see, these are the things that they realize, they know. And he had realized so much, this Brahman consciousness. One day he was, for days together, I don't know how many days, 4 days, 6 days, he was in that consciousness, completely lost, not eating, not sleeping. Then the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, they go to Ramakrishna and said, Lord, Vivekananda is lost. He is not really coming down to earth. Then Swami Sri Ramakrishna comes to Vivekananda touches him with the foot of with the toe on his head. And then immediately Swami Vivekananda comes down to earth. He brings him back from the Brahman consciousness to the earth consciousness, and he says, well, Noren, he used to call him Noren, not Vivekananda. Name was given much later, as you know. He says, Noren, the gates of that higher world I will close, and the key is with me. Until and unless you do all the works, you will not leave. And then the day you finish this work I have given you, you can leave. The day you realize who you are, you can leave. And at the age of 39, I think I quoted you last time, when one of his Western disciples, she says, Swami, what about your work? He says, I will not live to see my 40th year. So I told you that, So these are the people who have come as souls, not as evolutionary beings. So that's what I'm trying to explain from here. Assured of the apocalypse to be, it reckons not the moments and the hours. Obviously, the one who lives in sense of immortality, it does not reckon. And great patient calm it sees the centuries pass. I have here a poem from Sri Aurobindo. This is volume 5 and page SABCL 5, page 144. You see, essentially if you have this experience of the psychic being, the experience seems to be so confirmed that he may write a sonnet or Savitri or describe it in synthesis. The words themselves are so not only similar, same. That's why I was attracted to this poem called The Guest on page 144. I have discovered my deep, deathless being, masked by my front of mind, immense, serene. It meets the world with an immortal seeing, a God spectator of the human scene. No pain and sorrow of the heart and flesh can tread that pure and voiceless sanctuary. If you recollect, we have had many of these descriptions describing this voiceless sanctuary. Danger and fear, fate's hounds, slipping their leash, rend body and nerve. The timeless spirit is free. Awake, God's ray and witness in my breast, in the undying substance of my soul, flame-like, inscrutable, the Almighty Guest. Death nearer comes and destiny takes her toll. He hears the blows that shatter nature's house. Calm sits he, formidable, luminous. The same words we see, great, patient, calm, it sees the centuries pass. There's the same guest that Sri Aurobindo is describing here. Calm sits he, formidable, luminous. And then we see in the sure, deliberate process of world force and the long march of all revealing time. It is the origin and the master clue, a silence overhead, an inner voice, a living image seated in the heart, an unwalled wideness and a fathomless point, the truth of all this cryptic shows in space, the real towards which our strivings move, the secret grandiose meaning of our lives. You see, again there's a different description. It is the origin and the master clue. A silence overhead. You see, you must notice here the word that he uses, silence is S capital. See, when he is writing, who is this being that we call psychic being? In fact, I'll read out a passage from the Mother which will explain these lines, but I'll come to it later. Sri Aurobindo writes, it is the origin. What is this origin? It is the spirit. And the Mother says the psychic being is a divine gesture in human beings. Wonderful description. I'll read out the passage. But I was really attracted to that expression. Is a gesture of divine grace in human beings is the psychic being. What is this gesture and why is this gesture of divine grace? I'll come to that. But it is that origin, the spirit, a silence overhead. And this silence overhead is the, as I was calling, the Jivatman. It is that origin. From that Jivatman comes the psychic being. Most of you know Sri Aurobindo's philosophy that the Jivatman is the individual divine. And from that parent body called the Jivatman, there is a child called the psychic being which comes into evolution. So that is called the parent and the psychic being is the child. So from that silence overhead, we have this inner voice, a living image seated in the heart. That is the psychic being, obviously. An unwalled wideness and a fathomless point. The truth of all this cryptic shows in space. The real towards which our strivings move. The secret grandiose meaning of our lives. You understand this easily. In the sense, easy in the sense we know that this entire evolution is nothing but a march of events of time towards the realization of the psychic being. Each one of us is moving in this space and time, birth after birth, only to realize the psychic being. There are two evolutions which you must have heard or come to know in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. In the Life Divine it describes two types of evolution or two parallel evolution. One is the soul evolution, the other is the body evolution. The body is the outer, the soul is the inner. Or to put it differently, individual evolution and collective evolution. So Sri Aurobindo would say, in this world, there are two evolutions that are happening simultaneously. So what we see, what we are referring to here is the inner evolution, the evolution of the individual soul. Birth after birth, it grows. But on the collective level, what all we are doing, all the outer work, is a contribution to the collectivity of the human race. So that doesn't go waste. All that we are doing, knowingly, unknowingly, people may appreciate or not. But we are adding one more brick to this construction of this great new world. But then Sri Aurobindo says, if there is no inner evolution, the outer also has no meaning. Because most of the people, they think only of the outer evolution. That we build technology, we build science, more comforts, more this. Then Sri Aurobindo says, what is the meaning of all that? Is it, am I living only for a collective evolution? What happens to me? Who am I then? So he says, necessarily, there is this question of rebirth. But that is how this whole outer evolution also takes a meaning. Because we are evolving not only externally on the body and the collective level, but there is an inner evolution. So what we are referring to here is this inner evolution, that he says, evolution. He says, the real towards which our strivings move, the secret grandiose meaning of our lives. A treasure of honey in the combs of God, a splendor burning in a tenebrous cloak. It is our glory of the flame of God, our golden fountain of the world's delight. An immortality cowled in the cape of death, the shape of our unborn divinity. Beautiful lines. Again, you see, as I was telling you, these are all sketches of the psychic being. Each line is a different painting, is a different sketch. So the poet here takes tremendous poetic liberty to really give different images. So if anyone of you is a painting, you can see, you can have this psychic being in many of these forms. So this is a brilliant description where an artist or an art painter could really be inspired to do the painting of the psychic being. So here it says again, a treasure of honey in the combs of God. You see, what are these combs? Combs are these forms. Each form is a comb of God. But within this comb, the real honey is the psychic being. So you see, like we have this honeycomb, beehive, where there are these beautiful combs are there. But each one has a nectar. And in that nectar is the psychic being. So you see how Sri Aurobindo brings in this importance of the form and the essence. Because the comb without the honey is of no use. So, and for the honey to be there, there's got to be a form. Honey cannot be there without the comb. So there is a complete unification and the necessity of each other between the form and the essence. So he calls again the psychic being as a treasure of honey in the combs of God, a splendor burning in a tenebrous cloak. You see, this tenebrous cloak is this outer being, the outer body, outer nature. So in this outer being, there is a splendor of God burning inside. It is our glory of the flame of God, our golden fountain of the world's delight. You see, the world's delight. What is this world's delight? It's the delight of existence of the Brahman, delight of existence of the divine. So it's such a beautiful thing to see that the essence of Ananda, Satchit Ananda, because Sri Aurobindo explains in the Life Divine, there is the delight of existence of the divine. All this universe is essentially the delight of Ananda. But where does it stay? Where is its location? That location of the divine delight is the psychic being. So see how many different ways it's telling us our golden fountain of the world's delight and immortality cowled in the cape of death. This is the cape of death, the body. You see, is the outer cloak. Cape is that cowled in the hood covering head. So we have this immortality. So the only immortal thing within us is a psychic being. And the mother would tell us that the very first experience, or what I said, the contact with the psychic being, how do you know? What are its signs? How do you feel? The very first feeling is that you are immortal. If you get that sense that I am not mortal, the very day you can declare saying, I am immortal. That's what Swami Vivekananda said. We are all children of immortality. See, this sense of the immortal is very, very intimate to the psychic contact. Because I think that would be an extraordinary experience. Because we are always, all the time, in the fear of death, in the fear of gripped by mortality. But for the first time you say, no, I am immortal. Try to imagine the tremendous liberation you have. Not afraid of the body, not afraid of disease, not afraid of circumstances. Because I saw these are only passing things. I am immortal. So I would say, put it this way, the first experience of the psychic being is the experience of the sense of immortality. And then you may have peace, ananda, beauty, beatitude, all that. But the very first sign is, you say, I am immortal. But that is the absolute contrast with the outer body. The outer body is absolute mortality, and the inner is absolute immortality. So, that's a great realization what the saints and the sanya and the yogis experience. The shape of our unborn divinity. It guards for us our fate in depths within, where sleeps the eternal seed of transient things. Again the same thing. The eternal seed of transient things. So that is the psychic being. And then it guards for us our fate in depths within. This inner being has a secret of our future, of our determination, of our fate. Because it's a psychic being which is going to take birth after birth. So the future, the fate is known to the psychic being, not to you and me. We think only of the next 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, whatever. But the fate of an entire being, only the psychic being knows. So again it says, always we bear in us a magic key, concealed in life's hermetic envelope. Marvelous, what a poetry. Always we bear in us a magic key, concealed in life's hermetic envelope. You see, this hermetic envelope, of course, all of you know the meaning of hermetic. It's the body. It's a being. It's inside this envelope full of ignorance, of ego. In this tight envelope which does not give us freedom, there is that beautiful, as he calls it, the magic key. Is again the psychic being. A burning witness in the sanctuary regards through time and the blind walls of fall. You see, a burning witness in the sanctuary regards through time. Well, Meera Jyoti would say, hey, regards is regarde, a French word. How come it comes to English? Well, yes, Sri Aurobindo has put a lot of French into English. So this regards is very common. He has taken it almost, into English. A burning witness in the sanctuary regards, regarde, through time and the blind walls of fall. A timeless light is in his hidden eyes. He sees the secret things no words can speak, and knows the goal of the unconscious world and the heart of the mystery of the journeying years. Well, this is the psychic being, its knowledge part, that it has the entire secret of the journeying years, and it knows the goal of the unconscious world. The entire secret of this evolution lies with the psychic being. So you see, we gain the sense of immortality, we gain the sense of knowledge, we have the sense of the future of the world, of the earth's evolution, we have peace, we are untouched. All these things are packed in the little being called, what the Upanishad says, is not bigger than the thumb, angushta matre. So the psychic being which is not bigger than the thumb, it has all this, immortality, peace, knowledge, the future. So, what Indian philosophy or Indian yoga always said was, realize that by knowing which you know all else. That's the psychic being. Well, there is a para ending here. I think I would like to stop there and take up a beautiful reading from the Mother about the psychic being, and I'd like to read it out once. This is from volume 9 of the Mother, page 429. Well, I chose the two passages, but I'd like to read out this first, and let me see if I have time enough. The question is, what is the role of the spirit? I am referring to that spirit. Mother, One might say that it is both the conscious intermediary between the Supreme and the manifestation, and the meeting place of the manifestation with the Supreme. Well, I know you have perhaps come across many other descriptions, but she has given a very simple, beautiful description. The spirit is the meeting place between the manifestation, the earth, the universe, and the supreme transcendence. So there is the link between earth, or between manifestation she calls it, and the supreme, who is unmanifest. So we can say spirit is the link between the non-manifest and the manifest. To continue, spirit is capable of understanding and communicating with the highest Godhead, and at the same time it is the purest, one might say the least distorted intermediary of the highest Godhead in the outermost manifestation. It is spirit which, with the help of the soul, turns the consciousness towards the highest, the divine, and it is in the spirit that the consciousness can begin to understand the divine. Note one sentence, if you have already seen this. She says, it is spirit which, with the help of the soul, that's what I want to tell you. You see, the spirit is the universal consciousness. We have, as all of you know, there are the three poises: the supreme, transcendent, the universal, and the individual. The spirit is the universal aspect between the manifest and the supreme transcendence. But even this universal aspect cannot work on this earth without the individual divine called the psychic being. So she says, with the help of the soul, turns the consciousness towards the highest. It might be said that what is called spirit is the atmosphere brought into the material world by the grace, so that it may awaken to the consciousness of its origin and aspire to return to it. It is indeed a kind of atmosphere which liberates, opens the doors, sets the consciousness free. This is what enables the realization of the truth and gives aspiration its full power of accomplishment. I mean, I have read it many a time when I wanted to bring it to a class. You see, she puts it so beautifully, and it is, we understand it well when she says, it is indeed a kind of atmosphere which liberates, opens the doors, sets the consciousness free. So that is why we say, there the atmosphere isn't good. I mean, it's not a good atmosphere, it's a vital atmosphere, it's a mental atmosphere, it's a physical atmosphere. When we say the spiritual atmosphere, see, there's a difference. A spiritual atmosphere is what liberates, opens the doors, sets the consciousness free. All other kinds of atmosphere, be it vital or mental, it really infringes upon you. It doesn't liberate you. So, from a higher standpoint, this could be put in another way. It is this action, this luminous and liberating influence that is known as spirit. All that opens to us the road to the supreme realities, pulls us out of the mud of the ignorance in which we are stuck, opens the door to us, shows us the path, leads us to where we have to go. This is what man has called spirit. It is the spirit, it is the atmosphere created by the divine grace in the universe to save it from the darkness into which it has fallen. The soul is a kind of individual concentration of this grace. It's individual representative in the human being. Another definition of soul. I mean, we have seen so many in Savitri. She says, the soul is a kind of individual concentration of the grace, G capital. It's individual representative in the human being. Now, philosophically we understand it is the transcendental divine, the universal divine, and the individual divine. So the universal divine concentrates itself as the soul in the human being. The soul is something particular to humanity. It exists only in man. is like a particular expression of the spirit in the human being. The beings of the other worlds do not have a soul, but they can live in the spirit. One might say that the soul is a delegation of the spirit in mankind, a special help to lead it faster. It is the soul that makes individual progress possible. The spirit, in its original form, has a more general, more collective action. For the moment, the spirit plays the part of a helper and guide, but it is not the all-powerful master of the material manifestation. When the supermind is organized into a new world, the spirit will become the master and govern nature in a clear and visible way. So this is the difference. At present there is this overwhelming spirit, there are these beautiful souls, but there isn't that kind of a sufficient power in the spirit, even in this universal divine. Until and unless, as she puts it here, the supermind is organized into a new world, the spirit will become the master and governor of nature. So why is this necessity of the supermind? As we said here, is necessary for the evolution itself. Why? So that even the spirit, why is it happened that we did not have any transformation in this world? You see, we have been having saints and yogis and sages for centuries. But there's not much of a change in the human being, as you put it here. Master and govern nature in a clear and visible way. Because even the Godhead, what we call the spirit or the gods or the Godhead, goddesses, all these universal spirits did not have the sufficient power of transformation. So Sri Aurobindo saw the necessity of bringing the supermind, which alone can have this power of transformation. What is called new birth is the birth into the spiritual life, the spiritual consciousness. It is to carry in oneself something of the spirit, which individually through the soul can begin to rule the life and be the master of existence. But in the supramental world, the spirit will be the master of this entire world, and all its manifestations, all its expressions, consciously, spontaneously, naturally. It is in the individual existence that is what makes all the difference. So long as one just speaks of the spirit and it is something one has read about, whose existence one vaguely knows about, but not a very concrete reality for the consciousness, this means that one is not born into the spirit. That's what I was explaining to you, Shravana Manana. You have heard about it, as Mother herself says, so long as one just speaks about the spirit, we only speak about it. She says, whose existence only vaguely knows about, but not a very concrete reality which comes through nididhyasana, the daily practice. Or in integral yoga, it's not just daily practice, it's every minute to minute we have to practice. So when it becomes a nididhyasana of every minute, then only we are born into the spirit. And when one is born into the spirit, it becomes something much more concrete, much more living, much more real, much more tangible than the whole material world. And this is what makes the essential difference between things. When that becomes spontaneously real, the true concrete existence, the atmosphere one can freely breathe, then one knows one has crossed over to the other side. But so long as it is something rather vague and hazy, you have heard about it, you know that it exists, but it has no concrete reality. Well, this means that the new birth has not yet taken place. As long as you tell yourself, yes, this I can see, this I can touch, the pain I suffer from, the hunger that torments me, the sleep that makes me feel heavy, this is real, this is concrete. Mother laughs. That means that you have not yet crossed over to the other side. You are not born into the spirit. See, it's so magnificent, as she would say, the word used is reversal of consciousness. What the mother uses is a new birth into the new consciousness, as she puts it here, born into the spirit. What Sri Aurobindo calls it the reversal of consciousness. It is, she has given it so concretely. As long as you tell yourself, this I can see, this I can touch, the pain I suffer from, the hunger that torments me, the sleep that makes me feel heavy. If these are concrete, we have seen in the agenda many a time when she says, that is much more concrete than matter. It is difficult to understand how the spirit itself is more concrete than matter. But as she explains here, once we are born into the other world, other side, then it's a question of, which is more concrete? Matter is more concrete or spirit is more concrete? Now for me, matter is more concrete, so we are in this side. But the day spirit becomes more concrete, then as she puts it here, you are born into the new world. So this is what I brought for the psychic being, for the soul, as she puts it here. This is a more philosophical explanation, giving it the explanation of what the soul is all about, what Sri Aurobindo has been describing. Well, there is another one page, this thing which I would like to read before I leave. That's on page 426 in the same volume. Just I'd like to read a para or two here. There is also philosophically, but she explains. I think trying about this realization of the soul, she says, but to know that, one must stop being egoistic, being a separate person turned in on oneself and cut off from the supreme origin. This is what must be done to cast off one's ego. Then one can know the true goal, and this is the only way to cast off one's ego, to let it fall off like a useless garment. The result is worth the efforts that must be made, and then one is not all alone on the way. One is helped if one has trust. Well, again, a beautiful memory comes to my mind. It was in 1969, I think. When I had completed the higher course of the ashram, and I was leaving for Hyderabad. I had finished my education here. So I went to the mother and I asked her a couple of things. And while explaining, she said, Sri Aurobindo and myself, we have prepared an atmosphere here which is very congenial for the realization of the soul. And all this is just telling in French, that they have prepared an atmosphere which is congenial for the realization of the soul. Then she says, try it out. Ça vaut la peine. That's what I remember here. And then the result is worth the effort that must be made. Ça vaut la peine. So since then, I had a lot of chances or possibilities to go out abroad, to Hyderabad, to America and all that. But all the time that rings in my ears, ça vaut la peine. It's all worth it. And then she says, we have prepared the atmosphere. What we have been speaking about the spirit and spiritual consciousness. So, it was so deep in me that in spite of all the outer problems and the outer upheavals and whatever happens, when she herself told me, still in my ears, it's there in her voice. She says, Sri Aurobindo and myself, we have prepared an atmosphere here which is congenial for the realization of your soul. This is try to get it. Sabola Pen. Well, that was the conversation. Of course, before that I asked her, because as children we used to always go to the Samadhi and pray at the Samadhi for whatever we wanted, the blessings, there were problems or issues. And there were so many problems. I mean, as a young growing aspirant, the outer problems are not many because as students, there's not much. I mean, ashram education is quite a smooth sail. But I used to write to her so many of personal problems, the growth problems, inner vital problems. And I don't know if you know about Mother's music room, opposite the room is just behind the terrace. The terrace darshan is there where Mother used to stand. Just behind her is a small room called the music room. So for many years, Mother used to give the afternoon interviews in the music room, the morning ones in her own chamber. So the music room had just one table and a very tiny room, maybe with an organ was there. And in one of those years, 68 or 67, I forget, I had written a letter to the Mother, because oftentimes to speak in front of her was difficult, either you forget what you have to speak or you forget your language or, so you're not under control of yourself, your mind is suspended. So what I said after a couple of failures, I found out a trick. I used to write my problem before. So if I had a darshan or interview in the afternoon, I would send the letter that morning through Nalinida or somebody. So that, it's there with her. And then either she replies or I ask her, but at least something physical is there. So, of course, that day there was no table. Table was in a chamber, not in the music room. In the music room there was just a chair and we used to sit in front of her. And that day I had written some of my inner problems. And I bowed down at her feet, and when I got up, I looked into her eyes, like this. And I was about to ask her the question that, have you given me the answer or something, reply to my letter. Before I could reply, the answer was on a thigh in an envelope, the same envelope that I had written to her. I mean, of course, that was the inner communication. She burst with a glee and a smile and she said, I didn't even have to ask her the question. She said, see. So then she gave me that envelope with that answer. And then I was so grateful with tears in my eyes. I bowed down on her knees because I was sitting on my knees. So I put my head on her lap, and that was the only time in my life when she put both her hands on my head. And previously it used to be single hand, but this time I was on her lap, so she put both her hands, pressed them hard and blessed me. So that is then I realized what the psychic realization means, why she said that we are here to have prepared for the psychic being. So friends, so Sri Aurobindo is a living experience for me. It's not just a reading. Because all the time, whole of Savitri is nothing but Sri Aurobindo for me. It's not poetry, it's not a poem. It's purely an autobiography of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother.